You don't belong here. That's what my father said when I stepped onto the SEAL shooting range in Fort Halloway, surrounded by men who laughed at the sight of a woman picking up a rifle. None of them knew who I was, not even him. But I didn't flinch. I didn't explain. I simply loaded the weapon and pulled the trigger. And when the dust settled, every record on that range was shattered. That silence. It wasn't shock. It was fear. Because the ghost they tried to erase had just made herself unforgettable. And that was only the beginning. The gates of Fort Halloway hadn't changed much in 20 years. Same barbed wire fencing, same steel signage, same sharp-eyed guards, holding their stares just a beat too long. I walked in wearing tactical boots, dark jeans, a weatherproof jacket zipped up to the collar, and a plain black cap. No insignia, no ribbons, no rank. I was invisible just the way I needed to be. Inside the compound, the shooting range was already humming with energy. Cadets barked orders across the field. Instructors shouted feedback, and brass-lined officers strolled between stations, hands folded behind their backs. Testosterone leaked into the morning air like gunpowder, and I stepped straight into it. No one looked twice. To them, I was just another contractor. Maybe logistics. Maybe some civilian guest of an officer. That was perfect until I reached the line. Rows of men in fatigues leaned on crates, checking scopes or joking about wind drag and bullet drop, like they were comparing fantasy football stats. Among them stood a tall, square-jawed officer with cold steel for a voice. General Raymond Carter, my father, he hadn't changed. White crew cut. Jaw like a stone-carving chest of polished metal's hands, behind his back, gaze forward. He stood at the center of a group of commander's men who knew war by reputation more than experience, yet strutted like they'd carried the dead out of foxholes. He turned toward me as I approached, scanning lazily from head to toe. "You lost, ma'am," one officer said with a smirk. Another one chuckled. "Sweetheart, this ain't the rec range." I didn't respond. I glanced at this weapons rack near the firing line, letting my eyes skim past the polished M4s, the compact MK88s, until I saw it. The M14 walnut stock, long barrel, old-school punch. "I'd like to take a round," I said evenly, voice flat. That earned laughs all around me. Muscles flexed behind uniforms, testosterone surged louder. "You serious?" One younger SEAL barked. Raymond Carter turned fully, now eyes narrowing. "And you are?" he asked without a shred of recognition. I paused, looked him in the eye. "Beth." I said not a title, not a rank, just the name he hadn't spoken in over a decade. His expression didn't flinch, didn't shift, just a moment's pause, and then the same disinterest returned to his gaze as if I were nothing but static in the background. The commander beside him, tall, tan, overconfident, grinned. "She won a shoot letter. Hope the med tent's still stocked." Snickers broke out across the line. One of them whistled mockingly. I said nothing. I walked to the rack, picked up the M14. The wood was cool, aged familiar. I ran a quick check barrel sights bolt, then loaded a mag from the bench nearby. I moved into position, slow and steady, feet planted, elbow locked, chin. Down, then silence. The whole range fell still as I took aim. One breath and trigger squeeze, crack. The first target, 200 meters, exploded dead center. A few heads turned. Second shot, crack. A moving disc, clipped mid-spin, sliced in half. Now silence deepened. Third shot, a playing card taped to the edge of the frame, snapped down the middle. Clean. Impossible shot. But I wasn't done. Fourth crack. A double ricochet bounced off two armored panels. Pure trick shot. And split the final clay target, one no one had hit since the range opened. When I stepped back, I didn't speak. I didn't even look around. I laid the rifle down, locked the bolt, and walked away from the line. Behind me, no one moved. It was only when I was 10 steps past them that a voice cracked the silence. "Holy hell," someone muttered. "She just broke Len's record." They still didn't know who I was, and that was the point. To them, I was some anomaly. Maybe a fluke, maybe a civilian with lucky aim. No one suspected that the woman who just humiliated a line of elite shooters in silence had once led a Black Ops unit so far off the books it didn't even have a paper trail. Falcon unit. We were ghosts before the term became fashionable. Embedded in wars that never made headlines, we pulled people out of hell and left without a trace. I didn't just lead the team. I built it. Selected every member, trained them, fought beside them, bled with them. My voice was the one in their ear when everything else went dark. And not once in all those years did I ever need to raise it. They called me Falcon because I saw what others missed. Because I moved before anyone noticed I was there. Because my precision wasn't just on the trigger. It was indecision in silence and sacrifice. But no one on that range knew. Not even my father. Especially not my father. As I walked back toward the staging tent away from the auric line of SEALs, my steps echoed with memories I had tried to bury. My boots didn't just hit concrete. They stirred ghosts. I was 10 when I first realized I wasn't the child he wanted. Matthew had always been the chosen one, the golden son. Posters of naval fleets lined his bedroom walls. Dad taught him to salute before he could tie his shoes. I remember once at age 11. I ran the mile faster than any boy in my school. No one clapped. No one came. That night dinner, Matthew got a pat on the back for passing a swimming test. I got silence. Mom noticed. She always did. She'd find me late at night curled on the back porch, notebook on my knees. She'd brush the hair from my face, kiss my temple, and say, "You see more than they ever will, Beth. You don't need the noise." I believed her until she got sick. Cancer doesn't wait. Neither did the grief. Within 4 months, she was gone. And with her, the only person who ever really saw me. After that, I became a shadow in my own house. Dad stopped setting a plate for me at the dinner table. Not out of cruelty. No, that would have required acknowledgement. I was simply omitted. Matthew got a framed photo with Dad at a junior ROC event. My science fair medal ended up in a drawer next to old batteries. I started training alone. I memorized Dad's old field manuals by flashlight. I built a rope climb in the backyard and scaled it in silence. I shot soda cans with a pellet gun behind the tool shed. No one asked why. By the time I was 16, I could deadlift more than Matthew. By 17, I could disarm an attacker in under 3 seconds. I applied to military mines on my own, forged a signature when I needed to. No one noticed the acceptance letter on the kitchen table. No one said goodbye when I left, and that hurt, but not as much as realizing I expected it. The rest was survival. I trained, I learned, I rose. Always behind initials, never full names. No fanfare, no parades, just results. The military didn't need to know whose daughter I was. In fact, it was better that they didn't. Still, I carried one thing with me into every deployment. The ghost of that dinner table, that empty seat, that invisible child who kept showing up anyway. So when I picked up that rifle today, when I shattered every record on that range, I wasn't proving anything to them. I was honoring her. That little girl who climbed ropes alone, who ran until her lungs burned and still smiled, because no one could tell her to stop. Who wore silence like armor and dared the world to doubt her. They didn't see me coming. And that's exactly how I wanted it. When I signed my enlistment papers, I didn't use my full name, just the initial E. Carter. No first name, no rank ties, no family history, just a letter and a last name that to most meant nothing. That anonymity was my shield. I wasn't trying to hide because I was ashamed. I hid because I knew the weight my name carried, who my father was. What doors might open because of him, and worse, what doors might slam shut. I didn't want to be seen through the lens of his legacy. I wanted to earn every step on my own. And I did. Boot camp came easy. Discipline had always been my native tongue. I didn't complain. I didn't crack. I didn't need validation. I outshot, outrun, and outlasted every standard they threw at me. But I never spoke of my past, never mentioned where I came from. When asked, I'd say Midwest and leave it at that. They thought I was quiet, private, maybe shy. No, I was focused. My first deployment came 6 months after advanced training. Colombia. Jungle terrain cartel infiltration heat that made your lungs sweat. Our unit was tasked with finding a CIA operative presumed dead for 9 months. Most believed he was bones buried under jungle moss, but I didn't. I tracked movement patterns by studying birds, not the humans. Birds they knew when something was wrong in the canopy. And sure enough, that shift in migration pointed me to a clearing where we found the operative half-starved, tied to a tree. No casualties, no gunfire. We ghosted in and out. Mission classified. A few weeks later, Afghanistan Kandahar, province a compound deep in hostile territory 1, hostage 7 armed targets. Extraction window 13 minutes. I was second on entry. The lead took a round to the thigh, went down screaming. I dragged him behind cover while barking positions. One by one we cleared the rooms. I carried the hostage out while still firing behind me. I got clipped in the shoulder. Clean exit, no fracture. I didn't file the injury report. Didn't need sympathy. They called me a machine. I wasn't. I was just used to being hurt in silence. Then Somalia. We weren't even supposed to be there. Off book. No flags, no formal command. A U.S. engineer had been kidnapped by insurgents taken to a remote coastline where no satellite coverage could reach. We sailed in under the cover of darkness, hiked 12 miles inland with 40 of gear each. 3 days in sweltering heat. No communication, no resupply. We found the camp on the 4th night. I crawled through thorn brush and sand. Flies mapped their perimeter while chewing on adrenaline and dehydration. Then we struck. Not loud, not explosive, just surgical. 3 minutes. Everyone walked out alive except the men who tried to keep us out. No recognition, no medals, no welcome home banners, just silence. But I didn't mind because surviving had never been the hard part. It was being seen that always cut deeper. It wasn't until years later during a routine review of commendation archives that I found it. I had been consulting for a newly formed operations task force, helping them cross-reference intel from older classified missions. They were struggling with inconsistencies in field reports, trying to piece together which unit had pulled off a near-impossible hostage extraction in Afghanistan. The operation sounded eerily familiar. Too familiar. I requested the archive clearance. What I saw made my breath stall. The mission was mine. I remembered the terrain, the teams. Call signs the injured soldier I carried on my back while fending off fire with a sidearm. It was ours. It was mine. But the commendation, the one tied to the operation, the one praised in the after-action report, and honored with a meritorious service medal, was awarded to someone else. Lieutenant Matthew Carter, my brother. My blood froze. At first I thought it had to be a mistake, a clerical error, maybe a coincidental match in names. But the deeper I dug, the more missions I found missions I had led survived bled for all credited to Matthew. He wasn't even there. He had never stepped foot into those jungles or deserts. He had never heard the sound of mortar rounds whistling past a blown-out safe house. He had never stared death in the face and kept walking anyway. But his file, his service record, was glowing, decorated, fast-tracked. The Golden Boy. I stared at the report for hours, heart pounding. Then I pulled the personnel access log. Only one person had the override clearance necessary to shift those reports. General Raymond Carter, my father. He had done it deliberately. Methodically, he had taken my name off mission records, rerouted the accomplishments, reassigned the medals, and he had done it quietly, cleanly, just like he erased my presence from the family dinner table all those years ago. This wasn't just neglect. It wasn't ignorance. It was strategy. To him, Matthew represented legacy, the name, the lineage, the Carter bloodline, through the lens of masculine power. And I was just a complication, a variable. He never planned for a reminder that greatness didn't have to wear the face he chose. So he buried me. He polished Matthew's image using my victories. The fury didn't come all at once. At first it was confusion, a numb kind of betrayal. Then the realization that every single time I fought through gunfire, through sandstorms, through hell, my father had been standing at a podium somewhere shaking hands on behalf of a man who wasn't even there. My brother had stayed behind a desk, and I had crawled through minefields, and they called him the war hero. I didn't cry. Tears felt too small for this. Instead, I sat in that dim office staring at the glow of a false history built on my bones. And for the first time in my life, I felt something worse than invisibility. Erasure. They hadn't just overlooked me. They had rewritten me. The envelope arrived in a crisp white folder embossed with the Department of Defense seal. No return address, no note. Just my name, Colonel Elizabeth Carter, and a formal request. You are cordially invited to attend the National Honor Ceremony recognizing distinguished military families. My fingers trembled, not out of excitement, but disbelief. I wasn't the type they usually invited to ceremonies like this. My service record was still sealed in parts. My mission still existed in coded footnotes and redacted paragraphs. But I knew exactly why this invitation had reached me. Because of the man being honored as keynote speaker, General Raymond Carter, and the family they'd be celebrating his, I should have thrown it away. Instead, I went not out of pride or curiosity, out of something deeper, something that still hadn't let go of me. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was masochism. Or maybe I just wanted to hear once, just once, whether I existed in his story at all. The auditorium was massive with arched ceilings and rows of flags from every branch of service. Families sat dressed in uniforms and medals, pressed suits and pearls. The front rows were reserved for the honores. I didn't sit there. I took a place near the back, just close enough to see the stage, just far enough to remain unseen. My uniform was formal but subdued. No ribbons, no fanfare. The event began with military band, music, a video montage of generational service grandfathers to grandsons. Medals passed down like heirlooms. The audience clapped, nodded, some wiped tears. Then the announcer called his name. Please welcome our keynote speaker, recipient of the Distinguished Service Medal and architect of the Joint Command Leadership Doctrine, General Raymond Carter. Applause thundered. He walked onto the stage with a posture that hadn't changed in decades, chin up, shoulders back, authority carved into every step. His voice rang through the hall, deep and practiced. He spoke about sacrifice, about discipline, about the burden of command. Stories from his deployments embellished but familiar. And then halfway through the speech he smiled. The kind of smile he reserved for press photos and promotions. As many of you know, he said, I come from a proud lineage of service and I've tried to instill those same values in the next generation. He paused. I have one child, my son, Lieutenant Commander Matthew Carter, who has continued that legacy with distinction. I didn't blink, but something inside me shattered. One child. My breath locked in my chest around me. Heads nodded, hands clapped. No one looked my way. No one knew. Because to them I wasn't even a footnote. I was air. When the ceremony ended, people rushed the front. Cameras flashed. Officials shook hands. The crowd swarmed my father and brother, posing smiling. I slipped out the side door in silence. Outside, the sky was gray and low, a storm threatening. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked. Because sometimes grief doesn't scream. It just leaves. I thought I'd slip out unnoticed. Just another face in the crowd, just another invisible shadow fading into the city. But someone had seen me. It wasn't until I reached the parking structure 3 blocks away that I heard my name. Not shouted, not even spoken loudly, but just enough to freeze my steps. Colonel Carter. I turned. An older man stood by the passenger side of a black sedan, leaning slightly on a cane. His face was lined, sun-worn but alert. His dress blues were crisp, his ribbons heavy, and his eyes locked onto mine like he already knew too much. I served in Fallujah, he said, tapping his cane once on the concrete. Back in '08, there was a fire. Building collapsed. I was trapped under debris. I said nothing. I remember a hand pulling me out, he continued, eyes narrowing, small hand, left wrist burn scar about 4 in long. His gaze dropped briefly to my arm, where the edge of my sleeve had shifted during the walk. The scar peeked out faint now, but unmistakable. He smiled. I knew it was you the moment I saw you walk out that hall. My voice came slowly. I don't know what you're talking about, sir. He stepped closer. The hell you— Don't! You saved my life. I never got your name. Only saw R. Carter stitched on a patch as you dragged me out. Your voice, it was the only thing I heard clearly. You said, hold still, sir. I've got you. I looked away. He let the silence hang, then said quietly, the world should know he can't keep you in the dark forever. And then he left. The next morning I sat at my kitchen table in my tiny apartment outside Alexandria, a half-drunk cup of coffee going cold beside me. And for the first time in years, I opened a blank memorandum on my encrypted laptop. I began writing. I listed every mission I had ever led. I provided coordinates, casualty numbers, extraction times. I included video stills, team statements, satellite overlays, and my own declassified medical records. I attached testimonials from teammates who could vouch for my presence even if they never saw my full name. I ended the report with one simple request: consideration for the Medal of Honor under full identity, Colonel Elizabeth R. Carter. I submitted it through official channels, encrypted, flagged for honors and awards review. I waited. 3 weeks passed, then 5, then 7. Finally, on the 8th week, I received a letter. No phone call, no ceremony, just a letter. It started with bureaucratic pleasantries. We appreciate your service. Your contributions reflect distinguished conduct. Then came the blow. After review, your file has been withdrawn from consideration for the Medal of Honor on the basis of insufficient documentation regarding battlefield confirmation. I scanned to the bottom. The denial was signed by the presiding general of the Recognition Committee, General Raymond Carter, my father. I read the line over and over, fingers tightening around the page. He had reviewed it personally. He had denied me again. Even with proof, even with video, even with lives saved, erased me. A second time I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I didn't throw the letter. I folded it carefully, placed it in a folder beside the others, and closed the drawer because something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just rejection anymore. It was war. And this time, I wasn't playing ghost. It was 2:17 a.m. when I opened the laptop. The apartment was silent. No sirens outside, no footsteps above or below, just the hum of electricity and the weight of a rejection letter still sitting in my top drawer. I didn't play music. I didn't light a lamp. I let the glow of the screen guide me, just like the dim green scopes were used on recon in the mountains of Helmand. This time I wasn't building a report. I was building a case. I started with Operation Lantern Veil, Somalia. I pulled satellite overlays, inserted declassified timestamps, matched them against footage captured from helmet cams I had personally encrypted and saved for years, just in case. Then followed the burned, building the officer. I dragged out by his vest. His confirmation email, short-signed, sent from a military server, was already in my archive. Next came Kandahar. The sound file from the field recorder captured my voice, giving final clearance during the extraction. I isolated the audio, enhanced it, and embedded it with a geotag signature from the same hour. I attached the field med logs with my injury code complete, with the embedded RFID signature from the emergency evac chip sewn into my uniform. By 3:54 a.m., I had 57 pages. By 6:12 a.m., I had 142. Every OP I'd ever been a part of, every classified pullout, every nameless save was cataloged, cited, annotated, even the ones that didn't make the logs. Especially those. I didn't leave a single ghost behind. Then I wrote the cover letter to the Congressional Military Oversight Committee. Pursuant to the Defense Authorization Act Section 319B, I am submitting a formal request for independent review of my Medal of Honor application under the rarely used but constitutionally protected path of congressional review in cases of internal suppression or procedural manipulation. I signed it. Colonel Elizabeth R. Carter, call sign Falcon, former Commander, Joint Tactical Shadow Division. Y uploaded everything to the encrypted submission portal, set the classification level, flagged it as priority under legislative mandate, and hit send. Then I shut the laptop and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. I didn't. Sleep was for people who could still pretend. I wasn't pretending anymore. This wasn't about a medal. It was about truth, and I had finally chosen to speak it. I didn't expect a response so soon. 3 days after my submission, I received an encrypted message from a congressional inbox marked Staff Inquiry. I clicked it open. Colonel Carter, we've received your documentation and initiated protocol review under Title 10. One of our legislative aides would like to speak to you. He believes he may know you from prior service. Please respond with your availability. I stared at the name below the signature, Daniel Reyes. He had been 21 when I last saw him, barely out of Fort Benning Green as jungle moss, clumsy but fast. I'd pulled him out of a collapsed building in Columbia during Operation Scorched Tide. He'd frozen under fire and I'd covered his six until the team extracted. I hadn't heard from him since. Now he was working for Congress, and he remembered me. We met 2 days later in a secured side room of the Russell Senate office building. Daniel didn't wear a suit, just a dark-collared shirt, pressed slacks, and that same grateful look he wore the night I yanked him through a burning doorway. I saw the tattoo, he said immediately, eyes locked on my wrist, the raven same one I saw that night in Columbia. My sleeves were rolled up from DC humidity. I'd forgotten. I didn't think anyone remembered, I said. I never forgot, he replied. And I've spent the last year reviewing award blocks and suppressed commendations. When your file came across my desk, I knew. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Ma'am, we're going to help you, but this won't stay quiet for long. He was right. By the end of the week, someone leaked an anonymous mission dossier to a military blog known for exposing Black Ops stories. The post was simple. No names. Just an unnamed female officer responsible for high-risk extractions across 3 continents with confirmed saves exceeding 300 lives. It went viral overnight. Forums lit up. Vets started cross-referencing ghost ops, hinting at a woman called Falcon. Someone posted a blurry satellite image of a rescue in Kandahar showing a soldier's silhouette dragging 2 bodies behind a wall of smoke. The soldier had a raven tattoo on her left forearm. It wasn't definitive, but it was close. By Monday morning, I had 12 missed calls from blocked numbers and 3 anonymous voicemails offering media opportunities. I ignored them. Then the email came. Subject line, we know. Body Colonel Carter, I run a military investigative column for the Washington Sentinel. We have strong evidence linking you to multiple operations once believed to be led by Commander L. Hammond, who we now understand was a ghost alias tied to your work. We believe you are the operative known internally as Falcon. We'd like to talk on record or off. Are you ready to be heard? My pulse picked up. For a moment I hesitated. I had spent most of my career erasing my trail, making sure my name was never attached to my work. Not because I feared the work, but because I feared what would happen if my name were ever used to silence it. Now that silence was cracking. The world was listening. But was I ready? I closed my laptop, stood up, looked at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't look like a ghost anymore, and maybe it was time I stopped living like one. The invitation arrived on a crisp envelope embossed with gold trim and the seal of the Naval Officer Training Command. It was not a summons, but it carried the weight of one. You are hereby invited to deliver the keynote address at the upcoming SEAL commissioning ceremony at Fort Stratton. I stared at the words, my breath catching. This was no accident. This was a summons to face the shadows. I arrived at Fort Stratton the morning of the ceremony, dressed in full formal uniform, the one I rarely wore anymore. Polished boots, silver eagles. On my collar ribbons neatly aligned except one. The Medal of Honor still pending, still withheld. Backstage the air was thick with anticipation, brass and camouflage mingled with nerves and pride. Families sat proudly, some with tears glistening, others with stoic resolve. And there in the front row sat my father, General Raymond Carter. His posture was straight, his jaw clenched. Next to him, my brother Matthew in a freshly pressed lieutenant's coat. Neither recognized me. Not yet. The master of ceremonies took the podium and announced my name. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Colonel Elizabeth Carter." My name rang out like a rifle shot. The room fell into a hush. I stepped onto the stage boots, steady on the polished wood. The silence was deafening. No applause, no welcome. Just the heavy weight of years I had carried alone. I turned slowly to face the crowd, scanning the sea of faces. Some were familiar, others strangers, but all eyes. Even my father's were on me. I cleared my throat. "My name is Colonel Elizabeth Carter." I began, voice calm but resolute. "For over 20 years, I served in operations too classified to name. I led missions that left no signatures, saved lives without parades, and honored my oath when no cameras were watching." Gasps rippled through the audience. "I am the daughter of General Raymond Carter." Silence complete and profound. I am the soldier my father tried to erase. Heads turned toward him. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. He saw me. I continued. "When I submitted my Medal of Honor application, I learned it was denied by the very man who should have been my greatest supporter. I didn't accuse. I didn't plead. I simply stated the truth. This ceremony isn't about revenge. It's about truth. About quiet soldiers, silent leaders, and daughters who rise even when no one believes they can." I turned toward a young woman standing nearby, a graduate, with tears glistening on her cheeks. "Ensign Hope Keller, you exemplify what we protect. Courage without ego, leadership, without applause. Wear this medal not because it makes you a hero, but because you already are one." Applause broke. Hesitant at first, then swelling like a wave. I handed her the award, saluted, and stepped back. For a moment my eyes met my father's. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. But he didn't look through me. He saw me, and it burned. Just as the applause began to swell, a figure stepped forward from the side of the stage, Matthew Carter. His uniform was immaculate, his movements rehearsed. For a moment, the crowd thought he was here to make amends, to acknowledge the truth finally spoken. He cleared his throat and looked out over the audience, voice steady, but tinged with desperation. "I want to say something," he began. "About my sister." Heads turned sharply. Cameras zoomed in. The broadcast cameras caught the tension, transmitting it live across the nation. "I know many of you have heard accusations tonight," Matthew continued. "Claims about awards and recognition being suppressed. But you need to understand, Dad did what he thought was best to protect her." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Protect her," some whispered. Matthew raised his hand. "Yes, because the military is a brutal world, and sometimes tough decisions have to be made for the greater good. My father was trying to shield her from the pressure and danger that come with visibility." I stood still, heart pounding. I could let him speak, let the lies settle, or I could shatter them. I stepped forward, voice cold and clear. "That is a lie." The room went silent again. I reached into my folder and pulled out a stack of documents, official military records, time-stamped emails, personal testimonies. "I have here proof of deliberate manipulation," I said, holding the papers high. "Award nominations are rooted, mission credits reassigned. The same man who claims to protect me was the one who erased my name from history." I turned to the cameras. "This isn't just about me. It's about every soldier, silenced, every achievement stolen, every legacy rewritten by those who fear the truth." The broadcast switched to split screen. My face resolute. Matthew's expression faltering. I continued. "I stand here not just to reclaim my story, but to expose a system that values legacy over justice." Whispers grew into murmurs. The crowd shifted, some nodding, others stunned. Matthew swallowed hard, his defense crumbling. "Colonel Carter," one reporter whispered into a microphone, "how do you respond to your brother's claim of protection?" I looked directly into the camera, steady and unflinching. Protection isn't a racer. Shielding isn't silence, and I am not a secret to be hidden. The ceremony morphed into a spectacle of confrontation and revelation. The stage was no longer just a platform for celebration, but a battleground for truth. As the feed went viral, social media exploded, hashtags trended. Falcon masked, Legacy v Truth, visible no more. Inside the hall, my father sat rigid, pale as stone. The man who had never looked me in the eye was now forced to witness my reckoning unfold before the world. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief because the silence had ended. Because now I was finally seen. The day the Medal of Honor was finally pinned on my chest, the room was filled with a silence that wasn't quite peace. It was heavier, thick with years of neglect and overdue justice. The ceremony was modest, a small gathering of military brass old comrades, and a handful of veterans who had fought alongside me in the shadows. When the medal touched my uniform, it was more than a symbol. It was an acknowledgement of everything I had endured. Every erased mission, every silent battle, every moment I had been told I didn't belong. But the fight was far from over. Behind the scenes, the Department of Defense had launched an internal investigation into General Raymond Carter. The allegations against him were severe. Suppression of commendations, manipulation of military records, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. The news leaked quickly. Reporters, the Pentagon, and the military community buzzed with whispers. The once revered general was now under scrutiny, his legacy unraveling in real time. Amidst this storm, my brother, Matthew, remained silent. But Connor, our younger sibling, long overshadowed, made his move. One morning I found him waiting outside the base gym, arms crossed, tension radiating off him like heat. "I don't want this to go any further," Connor said, voice low and urgent. "Dad's mistakes. They're tearing the family apart." I didn't pause my workout. "What do you want, Connor?" He took a deep breath. "I want you to reconsider. Drop the investigation. Let the past stay buried." I stopped and looked at him. "You mean keep pretending, keep living a lie?" His eyes darted away. "No one wants a scandal. Not the military, not the country. We need to protect the Carter name." I wiped sweat from my brow. "The Carter name? You mean the name that's been used to erase me, to steal my service, to protect a false legacy?" Connor swallowed. "It's complicated. It's simple," I said. "I'm not erasing anyone. I'm just demanding the truth." He sighed. "You don't understand the consequences." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But I understand what it means to live without being seen, and I'm done." Connor didn't argue. He just nodded, once heavy with disappointment. That afternoon, word came down. Raymond Carter was suspended from his duties, pending further review. His office was quietly raided, files, emails, and nomination board minutes seized. The military shakeup was underway. I sat in my apartment that night, Medal of Honor resting on the table, a symbol of both victory and sacrifice. I hadn't come here for revenge. I'd come for justice. And as the walls around my father's empire crumbled, I knew one thing. The Falcon had finally struck. The day the news broke about Raymond Carter's suspension, whispers had already begun circulating in veteran circles. Stories of other women who had been quietly erased, sidelined, or punished for stepping too close to the truth. I'd heard some of these stories in passing, murmured over drinks or during support group meetings, but none had ever dared to speak publicly until now. A week after the military investigation went public, a woman named Lieutenant Sarah Jennings reached out. She'd served in one of the covert units under Carter's command, a unit rumored, but never officially confirmed. She'd been discharged with a less than honorable status after reporting misconduct. Her military record was scrubbed clean of her contributions. "I want to testify," she told me over a secure call. "For every woman who was buried, for every mission never acknowledged, for every voice silenced." We arranged a joint press conference. The auditorium was packed with journalists, veterans, military officials, and activists. Cameras lined the walls. Microphones crowded the podium. I stood beside Sarah, feeling the weight of thousands of untold stories between us. I stepped forward. "I'm not here for apologies," I said, voice steady and clear. "I'm not here to seek personal vengeance. What I need is systemic change." I outlined the extent of the manipulation, how awards and recognitions had been redirected, how service members had been silenced, and how the legacy of one man had overshadowed the sacrifices of many. Sarah spoke next, sharing her experience, how reporting abuse led to her dishonorable discharge, how she had fought to keep her story alive, despite institutional efforts to erase her. Their words resonated. The crowd listened, some with tears, others with clenched fists. The media coverage exploded overnight. Support poured in from veteran groups, advocacy organizations, and the public. Hashtags like #RestoreHonor and #Voices Unheard trended nationwide. Pressure mounted on the Department of Defense. A week later, an official announcement declared Raymond Carter was permanently removed from the Military Awards Board. His influence was revoked, his authority stripped. The system that enabled decades of silence and erasure was finally confronted. The fight had shifted. It was no longer about my story alone. It was about every soldier who had been denied justice. As the crowd dispersed from the press conference, I felt a strange mixture of relief and responsibility. Relief that the truth was breaking free. Responsibility to keep it moving forward. Because this wasn't just my battle, it was ours. And together, we would make sure the shadows gave way to the light. Leaving the military was quieter than I expected. No ceremony, no farewell speeches, no medals to be handed over in front of crowds. Just a signature on a file, a last salute in the mirror, and the closing of a chapter that had defined me for decades. I packed my bags alone, stepped onto a plane headed for Colorado, and let the mountains welcome me with their silent strength. The decision to open the Falcon haven came from years of watching women like me fall through cracks, brave, broken, and forgotten. Veterans who had given their all, but returned home to invisible wounds and ignored pleas for help. The center wasn't about me. It was about them. Nestled in a quiet valley, the building was modest. No grand plaques bearing my name. No portraits or glory. Just a simple emblem, an eagle in flight wings spread wide, the symbol of resilience and freedom. Inside rooms were filled with resources, counseling, physical rehabilitation, legal aid, and most importantly, community. A space where women could speak without fear, heal without judgment, and find strength in shared stories. I spent my days teaching combat skills, guiding tactical training, but also listening. Listening to stories of survival, loss, and hope, watching women rediscover their power and purpose. One afternoon, a young veteran named Elena approached me. She was sharp-eyed, her hands trembling slightly as she asked, "Why didn't you fight back harder? Why not destroy the people who tried to erase you?" I smiled, the kind of smile that carried years of understanding. I won the moment I stopped needing their approval. I told her revenge would have made me one of them. I wanted freedom not just from them, but from the chains I carried inside. She nodded slowly, absorbing the truth. As the sun dipped behind the Rockies, casting long shadows across the training field, I stood outside, holding my old M14, the rifle that had been with me through the darkest nights. I placed it carefully inside a glass display case at the center, alongside a small plaque that read simply, "Fired with truth, forgiven with strength." I breathed deeply, feeling the weight of the past lift, replaced by the promise of what was to come. No longer invisible, no longer forgotten, I was finally free. Weeks after opening the Falcon haven, a young veteran named Maya approached me quietly. She was new to the program, eyes still raw with the pain of transition scars, hidden beneath sleeves and smiles. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in amber and gold, she asked me something I'd been asked before, but this time it hit differently. "Why didn't you destroy him?" Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Your father? Why didn't you fight back harder, tear down everything he built?" I looked at her, seeing myself in those searching eyes, hungry for justice, burning with a need for retribution. But I had learned something deeper. I smiled, gently pushing my sleeves up to reveal the faded scar and the raven tattoo marks of battles fought both outside and within. I won the moment I stopped needing his approval, I said, voice steady. Destroying him wouldn't have freed me. It would have chained me to the past, to the anger and the pain. Maya nodded, absorbing the quiet strength in my words. I didn't need to win against him, I continued. I just needed to stop needing him. The truth hung between us, fragile but fierce. Later that evening, as the center quieted and the last trainees left for the day, I walked outside, the cool mountain air brushing my face. I carried my old M14, the rifle that had once been my weapon, my shield, my companion through wars and silence. I placed it carefully into the glass display case at the center. The same case where future generations would see the symbol of resilience, not just violence. I stood there watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of purple and orange. The fading light cast long shadows across the training field, stretching like the journey I'd walked. I whispered to myself, barely audible over the whispering wind. You don't need a legacy to exist. You only need to live true. And in that moment, beneath the vast sky and endless possibilities, I finally felt whole. Not because I had been seen by the world, but because I had learned to see story too. They didn't expect me to show up. Honestly, I'm not sure I did either. The wedding invitation sat on my desk like a dare. Heavy cardstock, gold-embossed lettering, one name printed neatly across the front. Major General Evelyn Maddox. Not Evelyn. Not Evie. Certainly not our daughter. Just a title. As if that made me easier to stomach. 6 years. That's how long it had been since I heard my parents' voices in any form other than a voicemail forwarded by mistake or a name dropped in pity at a military gala. No calls on my birthday, no messages, when I nearly lost my hearing in Helmand. Just silence. Cold, curated silence. But now, I get a wedding invitation to my sister Haley's big day. Handwritten note inside. Behave. No, we miss you. No. Hope to see you. Just that one word. Like I was a threat. I turned it over in my hand, wondering how they'd even found my mailing address. Maybe they didn't. Maybe the Army's event protocol team forwarded it. Or maybe Haley just figured her little PR stunt wouldn't be complete without the family disgrace in the back row. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a performance. And I wasn't invited to be part of the family. I was invited to be proof that they tried. That's the thing about revenge stories. People assume they start with anger. But mine, it started with disbelief, then a sort of quiet, aching curiosity. Did they still know how to write my name? Outside, the wind tapped at the window pane like it wanted to say something. I leaned against the sill and stared out across the Stuttgart training grounds. A new class of recruits were mid-drill, young, hopeful, loud. They didn't know yet what it meant to be erased by the people who raised you. I envied that. A knock broke the stillness. My aide, Simmons, stepped in without waiting. You going? He asked, eyes flicking to the envelope. He always knew more than he said. Just got the invite, I replied, voice flat. He raised an eyebrow. That's what we're calling it. I didn't answer because it wasn't an invitation. It was a challenge, a test, maybe a warning, and I hadn't decided yet whether to walk away or walk in. Either way, I'd bring the stars on my shoulders, not to show off, but to remind them they don't get to erase me quietly anymore. Virginia greeted me like a postcard. Someone forgot to personalize. Perfect cherry blossoms, clean sidewalks, hedges trimmed with surgical precision. Too clean, too staged. The kind of place that looks perfect from far away until you get close. I pulled into the cul-de-sac and parked across from the house I once called home. Everything looked exactly the same, which somehow made it worse. I hadn't been back since my father's funeral. Not really. Back then, there wasn't even a seat left for me in the front row. I stood the entire time in full uniform, while my mother sat between Haley and Uncle Roy, like nothing was wrong. Today it was my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner, and somehow that stung more. I knocked a pause. Then came the scent lemon polish. Barbara Maddox's signature. The smell of disapproval disguised as cleanliness. The door opened. She stared at my uniform for a beat too long. "Evelyn," she said, voice even, "please don't ruin this for Haley. Not hello, not you look well. Just a warning." I nodded barely. Inside, nothing had changed. The same china cabinet, the same chandelier, the same tension humming under the mahogany table. 14 people sat around it. 15 seats. Guess which one was mine? Far end right beside the sideboard. The one spot where the heat from the kitchen would warm your back just enough to keep you uncomfortable. Not next to Haley, not even in the middle. They knew exactly what they were doing. No one said Evelyn's back. No one introduced me. I was just there like a shadow in a starched uniform. One cousin glanced up and whispered to someone beside her. I caught the words, security. I didn't even flinch. But maybe you've been there. Walked into a room that used to hold your memories and felt like a stranger. If that's ever happened to you, I bet you still remember the silence louder than the laughter. It's wild how people can erase you in plain sight, isn't it? The reception ballroom looked like a magazine spread. White linen gold-rimmed plates, a ridiculous ice sculpture shaped like intertwined initials. Everything about it screamed perfection except the seating chart. My name wasn't there. I stood in front of the brass easel scanning down the rows. Haley and Andrew at table 1. Our parents at table 2, cousins at 3 and 4. And on it went no Evelyn Maddox, no Major General, just a tiny E. Maddox scribbled in small print at table 12, near the catering exit. The napkin at my place was a slightly different shade of cream, subtle but clear, not a mistake, a message. I'd seen battlefields with less calculation. Haley floated through the room like she owned the air. Dress perfect, makeup flawless, that trademark. Smile that made people trust her even when she was twisting the knife. She paused near my table just long enough to smile and say, "I told them not to make it too military looking for your side." Then she walked away before I could reply. I wasn't surprised, but still I'd saved her fiancé's life, and now I was being treated like a +1. Nobody claimed. The toast started. Dad went first. Toasted. New beginnings. Mom added, to loyalty and grace. They both looked right through me. No mention of the daughter who flew halfway across the world. No thanks for attending. No welcome back. Then Haley took the mic. Champagne flute in one hand, she swirled like it was a Broadway moment. To think, she said sweetly, even my big sister made it tonight, flying all the way from wherever she guards doors now. The room laughed. Not softly, not awkwardly. It was the kind of laugh that comes easy when the target isn't in the room. Except this time I was. And then Barbara, my mother, chimed in from table 2. She's the shame of this family, but at least she's punctual. That was it. The whole ballroom tipped into full laughter. Glasses clinked. No one looked uncomfortable. No one tried to stop it. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I stood up slowly, lifted my glass untouched until now, and took a calm sip. The silence that followed didn't come because I shouted. It came because I didn't. I set my glass down and spoke clearly. The people I guard, I said, outrank everyone in this room. That was all. But it hit harder than any insult they'd planned. No one laughed after that. Not because they understood, but because for the first time, they didn't know where to place me anymore. I was still standing. Not because I had something to say, but because for once I needed them to see me, not guess, not assume, not avoid. And then I saw him, Andrew, standing at the far end of the ballroom, halfway between his new in-laws and the people who once cheered his commissioning. His jaw was tight, eyes locked on mine. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He just walked slow, steady with that soldier's gait. You can't fake. He moved past the cousins, the neighbors, the friends of friends, past my mother who whispered something sharp that he ignored, past Haley, who froze mid-glance and clutched her champagne like it might save her. He stopped one pace away from me, not close, not casual, formal, and then he saluted, crisp, sharp regulation, perfect. Then clear enough to cut through every chandelier and every lie in the room. He said, "This is Major General Evelyn Maddox, my commanding officer. Please forgive my wife." You could hear the gasp before you saw who it came from. Haley's smile cracked. Her eyes went wide. The mic slipped from her, hand hit the floor and thudded like a gavel. She fainted. Someone screamed. A flute of champagne shattered. My mother stood so fast her chair toppled. But me, I didn't blink because this wasn't revenge. This was recognition, and it was long overdue. The ballroom froze not with panic but with something colder realization. Then from one of the side tables near the wine bar, a man in uniform stood. Colonel Reardon, retired, but still proud. He raised his hand in salute. No words, just respect. Then another General Park. Then a third, an older woman I didn't know but whose eyes said everything. She'd worn stars once too. 4 salutes, 4 truths made visible, and no one could unsee it now. My mother tried to speak. This is not the time. But no one was looking at her anymore. The eyes in the room had shifted not because I asked for them, but because they finally understood what they'd erased. And just like that, the shame they'd thrown on me fell back on them, quiet but heavy. Andrew lowered his salute. He stepped back, giving me the floor without ever saying another word. I didn't take the mic. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there. And somehow that was louder than anything they'd ever said to me. The hotel lounge was quiet, not cozy, strategic. Velvet chairs, dim lamps, hushed voices. The kind of place where secrets didn't echo. Barbara Maddox sat across from me in a pale cardigan and a blouse with pearl buttons. Not one was undone. Of course she didn't reach for me, didn't smile, just said, "You certainly made a statement." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She took a sip of her cold coffee. The media is buzzing. Some of the headlines are flattering, some aren't. Still nothing from me. I wasn't prepared, she continued. None of us were. Not Haley, not even your father, if he was still. Haley fainted, I said flatly. Barbara blinked. She has sensitivities. To truth, I asked, or to not being the center of attention. Her grip on the cup tightened. I didn't come to fight. Then why did you come? I asked. She hesitated, then leaned forward just slightly. I thought maybe you could release a statement, something neutral, clarifying that we didn't fully understand your position. There it was. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want me to issue a press statement not to correct a lie, but to protect your discomfort. She flinched. Slight, but I caught it. You have to understand, she said. We didn't mean to hurt you. I was trying to protect the family's image. You were different. Loud. I wasn't loud, I replied. I was visible. That's not the same thing. Then I reached into my leather folio. I slid a document across the table. She didn't touch it, just stared. This was sent 7 years ago. I said an anonymous tip to the military ethics board, alleging I falsified combat reports, questioned the validity of my Bronze Star, said I was unstable, politically promoted. Barbara didn't blink. I was passed over for my first star that year, I continued. No explanation, just silence. That could have been anyone, she said quickly. You're a public figure. I slid the second page forward. Linguistic analysis, military use only cross-referenced writing patterns, sentence structure, phrases. I tapped the bottom line. 96% a match. Haley Maddox. Secondary lexical contributor. Barbara Maddox. Barbara's lips parted, then closed again. For the first time, I saw it. The crack behind the pearl buttons. You, she started. I didn't write it, but you gave her the language. I said, the access, the documents, the tone. She sent it, but it was your fingerprints. She looked down at her coffee. It had gone cold. You didn't just ignore me, Mother, I said. You sabotaged me, quietly, professionally, efficiently. Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. I made choices, she whispered, and I paid for them. I didn't stop loving you, she said. No, I replied. You just stopped calling. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was heavier than that. Do you have any idea what it feels like, I said, to watch your mother pretend you don't exist? Her voice cracked. I was trying to protect your sister. She couldn't compete with. She didn't have to compete, I said sharply. She just had to show up, and you made sure I was too buried to be seen. Barbara looked older in that moment, not softer, just exhausted. She reached a hand halfway across the table. I never wanted to lose you. You didn't lose me, I said. You pushed me out the door, then blamed me for not coming home. She said nothing. Her hand stayed hovering, never landed. If someone asks why I stopped coming, continued, don't say I drifted. Don't tell them it was complicated. Tell them the truth. You made a choice, and so did I. I left the documents on the table. She didn't chase me. That's the thing about betrayal by your own mother. It doesn't need a raised voice. It just needs silence and paperwork. The breeze off the Amalfi Coast smelled like salt and lemon. I stood barefoot on the terrace of a small cottage tucked into the cliffs, a cup of dark espresso in one hand, the sea stretching out below me like it had nothing to prove. For the first time in years, I felt still. No orders, no dress codes, no ceremonies or salutes, just morning light canvas, and silence that didn't punish me for existing. The press never got the statement they wanted. I didn't give them a quote or a soundbite. Just one moment, one salute that said everything, and that was enough. The clip from the wedding went viral. Over 3 million views in the first 48 hours. The caption read, "They mocked her until her rank silenced the room." I never commented, never shared it, never explained. I didn't need to. Weeks later, the Pentagon called. They offered me the chair position on the new Joint Ethics Advisory Board, a seat built ironically out of the very betrayal that tried to break me. But I said no. Instead, I launched the Resilience Foundation, a national resource for service members whose careers have been sabotaged by the people closest to them, spouses, siblings, parents. We help them rebuild not just their clearance but their confidence. Because sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought in uniform. They're fought at dinner tables and family group chats, in empty seats at funerals. The irony, the people who worked hardest to erase me are the ones who made me unforgettable. A few months ago, my mother sent a letter handwritten. She said she watched my interview on PBS, the one about betrayal and chain of command. She wrote, "I didn't realize how far you had climbed. I wish I had seen you then." But that's the thing. She did see me. She just didn't want to. And now she doesn't get access to who I've become. Not because I hate her, but because I finally love myself enough to choose distance without guilt. The military taught me how to lead under fire. But exile, my family taught me that, so I made peace with it. This morning, the boy from the village came by with a basket of bread and olives. He asked in broken English, "Were you really a general?" I smiled. "Once," I said. "Now I'm just someone who decided not to disappear." He grinned and ran off barefoot and laughing. I turned back toward the sea, and for the first time the silence didn't hurt. Have you ever had to walk away? Not to hurt them, but to finally protect yourself. I'm not asking for details. Just if this story reminded you of someone or some silence you've lived through, tell me you're here. That's it. Just drop a or a word. I'll read them all. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you felt seen, even just for a moment, then I'm glad we found each other.